Hi, everyone. Welcome to Umatta Consultant Podcast. If today's your first time on our show, please make sure you subscribe to all of our social media channels, especially Spotify. As you know, today we have a special privilege of speaking with Mike. Mike is the CEO of Bions. I would love for him to also introduce himself as he sees fit so we can dive more into the questions. So, Mike, the mic is yours, please.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to share some time with you and talk about all the fun things in the future because I love technology. I've been reading encyclopedias since I was a little kid. I spent years in government research. I love design thinking, and I love the space where learning, education, and training intersect with humanity and human performance. I don't think we could be at a better time to have the ingredients to make things that actually impact people's lives.
Excellent. This is why we have you here to dive more into your passion and the things you've been studying all along. To start off for our audience, our first question for you, you often say energy and persistence conquer all things, which I find very interesting, by the way. Where did that come from and how has it actually shown up in the way you build and lead others?
Well, that's a Ben Franklin quote, and I really like Ben Franklin. I was giving a talk recently to a bunch of high school kids, and someone said, "Who's your favorite person in our country?" And I said, "Ben Franklin." He had more influence on the way of life that we have and the way that life changed than many people. And he didn't have an official position. He was an entrepreneur, an engineer, a thinker, a designer. And I think that quote for me makes me think that a lot of people think about what's possible and what's impossible. And
Mm.
that really makes me think about what's possible and what's not possible yet. And that's where we really are able to push the boundaries of technology and products where we say, don't know if this is possible, but let's go on a journey together and like actually see what's potential.
Yes, excellent. I like the idea of what's possible yet. And just out of curiosity, I'm extremely excited to ask you a follow-up question. Where did you get that passion from? Was it from your childhood or?
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, my dad had an engine rebuilding business, and one of their pastimes was racing. And it
Mhm.
wasn't one thing to get the car out there. It wasn't one thing to finish the race. You had to be first. And so it wasn't just about speed, it was about precision and safety and all these other qualities. And I think that just inspired me to say, okay, let's go.
Makes sense. Awesome. All right. So, how about also going into a little bit of your work experience? We know you spent some time at NIST working on advanced systems. What did that experience teach you about relationships between human capacity and technology?
Well, I'll say that one taught me a whole lot, but it's the predecessor experience to that. So in the middle of college, I took a break and had a
Mm.
record deal and toured in the mid 90s,
Wow.
writing, recording, collaborating with others. And there's a big difference between four people that can play Beatles songs and the actual Beatles. And so
Yes.
to emulate something or to copy or to cover something is one thing, but when you're trying to create, you have to have the highest levels of trust and flow state and like rapport with the team. Kind of look at teams or projects like a band in many ways. So fast forward, when I was at NIST, it was an interesting place. There were a lot of very, very smart people working on a lot of research items. And I spent time really asking people like, what was the most recent breakthrough in your domain?
Mm.
Did it? What was the relationship to the current state of the art and the paradigm? And what were the outcomes? And what I discovered is that like 9 times out of 10 in
Yes.
conversations, the person that actually changed the game in any domain was the person that wasn't the expert. Which
Wow.
is what makes us kind of breaks us. Our expert blindness traps us from doing one really good thing, asking naively curious questions. And if we
Mm.
ask the right questions, if we're pointed at our passion and we ask the right questions, and we have the right people around us and we assemble the right band,
Yes.
anything is possible.
I find what you say very interesting because my background is in human resources. And as you know, for supporting organizations, we tend to dive deep into expertise of employees or even outside consultants to come in. But to say that sometimes the breakthroughs does not necessarily come from an expert is quite interesting. How did you come up with that conclusion?
I was just walking around talking to people, just being the curious person that I am, because my only superpower is I don't run out of questions. I like to question everything. And I think that comes from really fundamentally loving science as a kid and just saying, well, what is that? How does that work? Why is that here? Where did that go?
Right. Excellent. Most people would say, if you ask too much questions, you're just, maybe sometimes wasting people's times, but sometimes that's where curiosity comes in and discovery changes things. Mike, you have also said if you articulate the problem well enough, the solution reveals itself. What does that look like in practice for leaders today?
So as people, we are problem solvers. It's wired into us. When we see a problem, we solve it. And most often, we solve a problem without really fully understanding it, which creates more problems. And problems comes from pro and blemos, meaning something thrown in front of us. You hear the evidence in people's language. Like people say, like, we'll get out of this, we'll get over this, we'll get through this. And they're really talking about the obstacle. If we really focus on the outcome, where do we want to actually get to? And we articulate the problem well enough, like a donut, the solution appears perfectly in the middle.
Excellent, excellent. Before we get to the next questions, can you tell us a little bit about your company for those who are not familiar? Just curious.
Based upon a dozen years of my DoD-funded research in intelligent tutoring and adaptive systems, we launched our company a year and a half ago, and it's called Baryons. Baryons is that personal partner. It's voice-based. Literally call it on the phone like a friend. And it's a coach, a mentor, an advisor, a consultant, but it's really built on positive psychology to really help individuals find their way, create their next self. The people that use it say it increases their accountability to themselves, increases their ability to collaborate with others, increases their creativity for how they think about interacting with the world around them. And I love the stories that I get from people. It makes me so happy, the LinkedIn messages and other messages that I get from people. And now we're taking what that is and helping enterprises realize the missing signal inside. Like we're in remote workforce time. We don't have enough times. We don't have enough managers for stand-ups, all those things. And there's a signal that's there. So we have this really safe space for people to work on themselves, but we're able to understand human energy and alignment and coherence and really give a big unlock to HR leaders and leaders in an organization so that you can week over week improve the cycle of feedback and interventions that you might apply.
Excellent. It sounds like performance management in the technology, or I could be wrong.
I'll say this, you could say it's performance management, and I would say it is the next generation leapfrog evolution of performance management. And it really unlocks organizational intelligence at the individual level, at the team level, and even at the company level.
Excellent, excellent. Happy to dive more into some of the work you're doing. That takes us to, there's a lot of talk about AI replacing people. And even with the work your organization is doing, I'm sure some people have some criticisms towards that. You see it differently. What does the future of work actually look like when it's with humans plus AI teams?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So having the intelligence that we have really gives knowledge a free flow anywhere. If you look at what leadership was, if we think about what Drucker's model, the knowledge worker was, what's the worker of the future? I think it's the wisdom worker.
Right.
The leadership that we've had to date has really relied on knowledge in many ways. You knew more, you were a leader. Or if you were a leader, you had to know more. Now that knowledge is kind of free, there are new qualities that you really need to think about, as a leader: discernment, judgment, clarity, decision quality. These are really the new paramount, tools for leaders along the way. And I look at AI as, you can think of it as it's a thing, but I say it's just really good software. And if we just assume that it's really good software and it shapes us and we shape it, then it's augmenting us.
Right.
And so I look at AI as an augmentation of individuals, teams, and the overall enterprise. And there are a lot of things that AI can do for us, but the human element is the most important element because we have discernment and clarity and judgment and decision quality, and we need to amplify that. Like if you think about today, like the amount of money that organizations are investing in AI versus what the return is, there's a lot of wonderment about, well, what are we really getting? Well, we haven't invested in the people. We
Yeah.
haven't invested in the leaders that have to think critically about, how do I bring this into my team? Yeah, my company bought X, Y, or Z LLM or Microsoft or OpenAI product in some ways, but how are we really empowering people to think about the real human side of work and what can be automated or what can be supported through augmentation?
Makes sense. I like when you say AI is like a software, very similar to mathematics, moving from manual mathematics to using the calculator to computers and so forth. So it's the change of skills that people have to adapt later on. And we have a follow up question for you where we are curious to learn, what are companies getting wrong right now when they're trying to adapt AI or technology, especially with your platform or your software that you have introduced?
Yeah, I see a bunch of trends from a bunch of large to very small organizations. I can tell you, I've seen some of the larger companies, they're buying one or more tools and saying, everybody just use them. And
Yes.
they're providing some training and guidance, but doing like the real hands-on work and having the social proof. Like, you and I are in a workshop together. We're
Right.
solving a problem. I've never worked with you. I've learned something along the way. I think the critical stuff is, it's really about empowering ambassadors. Like,
Mhm.
where I've seen it this really successful, it's having the ambassadors that spend the time, people to people, person to person, one at a time, and really do that. That doesn't scale well, but I can tell you it works very well. One of the best organizations that I've seen implementing AI is Goodwill of the Southern Alleghenies here in Pennsylvania.
Mm.
Why? Because they have a leader that said, we don't have to pilot anything, just do what makes sense. And I'm
Wow.
going to empower you with boot camps and some training, and I'm going to give you the tools. And then we're just going to connect and tell stories together. It's a very organic way of thinking about it. And for me, it kind of is a natural way to think about it. But the larger enterprise you get, we start to get into Dunbar's number. Once you get past that 150, things get a lot harder to understand the signal that's inside your organization.
Very true. Very true. Even some employees are skeptical about using these applications that their organizations have recently purchased, where it's like it's a free for all. Just use it however you want to use it and sort of improve your performance with it. But employees are seeing, are they using it to replace our work because the AI and the technology is learning what I do? So there's a win for the employer, and there seems to be a lot of negative reactions from employees. So I wanted to also ask, what is the risk of implementing AI without alignment to how people actually work and make decisions?
Well, there's some really practical stuff. I've heard a lot about AI sabotage, where someone's on a project and AI is coming in and then they do something. And I saw a great example of it where someone had taken the output of a system that was true and proper and correct, and they downloaded the HTML, changed it to something really wildly insane, and then sent it back through their project team, and they were ready to shut the project down. The engineers stayed up all night in this case and looked at the logs and said, there's no way that the system actually did this.
Right.
There's some real extreme challenges in thinking about things that way. I think I'll just go back to what I said earlier. This really is a person by person. It's a very personal thing. Gen Z, I just saw a study this morning about Gen Z's distrust for AI. Growing. Like it was like 40 some percent, and now it's like in the high 20s. But they're the ones that ultimately have to use it the most. And so,
Yes.
how can we, as workforce development, HR, people development,
Right.
even higher education, what can we do to empower these students and early career professionals? Because they are going to be the ones that are powering our organizations in 2 to 10 years. And if they're not embracing the tools, there's some deep concern about jobs and displacement and all of those things. So it's like, well, do we want to be buggy whip makers, or do we want to learn to change tires? Like, we got to choose where we want to be in an industrial transformation.
Absolutely, completely agree with you. I find the statistics that you shared very interesting too, because the Gen Zs are the ones exposed to technology the most. So I'm surprised they're also the ones who are resistant of using AI tools to sort of help them improve their work and so forth. I would have thought it would be the baby boomers because probably they're like, this is not part of our generation. But it seems like the opposite. Quite interesting.
My mom loves ChatGPT. All the AI work that I do, I've just very softly introduced it to her. And over the
Yeah.
last few months, every time I see her, she says, "Guess what I did with ChatGPT?" She's so proud.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent. I think we need to learn more about this research and see how to empower more of the Gen Zs because it's definitely a big concern knowing that they're the future, or actually, right now, would be the ones implementing AI and using the AI tools more often. As organizations scale the use of AI, how do you prevent human experience from getting lost? The interpersonal skills, the emotion, the empathy, the things that we do naturally.
Well, I can tell you in my own experience with my Baryons team, because I have an amazing leadership team and they're all AI first citizens. And we are constantly collaborating with AI because one person with AI is just about as good as two
Mm,
people with AI is, off the charts according to UPenn and Harvard. And so it's what I found is it's really starting with being human. Start the meeting with being human. How was your weekend? How are things going? Don't start with the agenda, because if
yes.
you start there, then that humanness carries through the meeting. And we have to have a bit of intentionality about it.
Right.
We also have to have a little bit of fun with it. Like you
Yeah.
can do a lot of very good things with AI. You can also do a lot of really funny things with AI. And so we are always joking around and making ads that are really funny and doing like really fun things to keep it light and humorous, because otherwise I could see things being very sterile and stoic in a lot of ways. I mean, one of the concerns that I see, there are a number of companies that are saying, if we're going to measure how much you use AI,
Mm,
and that's going to become part of your performance. And the question is, well, it's not how much you use it, it's how well you use it,
right.
in some ways. And so I think that's a really critical concern, is that like you don't have to use it a lot. You just have to use it just the right way.
Right.
There are job interviews out there for engineers where they're saying, cool, that's my salary package. How many tokens do I get for
Yes.
for an LLM to do my job? I think that's an interesting trend.
It is. It is. I like how you connected to solving problems, right? It's more of a matter of using AI to be productive, to be efficient, to get good outcome from it. But just if you're just using it for the sake of using it, then is it really improving workflow? And I think that is really what employers want to solve. It takes me to our next thought, which is what are the biggest mistakes you see large organizations make when they're trying to innovate AI and emerge other technology into their organization?
Well, the first one was the knee jerk reaction that initially happened when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, and corporations said, nope, can't use it. We're going to ban it. I understand. People say never let your lawyers do your deals. Well, like never let the security team stop you from having the best technology to build competitive advantage for yourself. And so, ultimately, I've seen a lot of companies instantiation of their own version. We'll call it S-Smart GPT or whatever GPT instance they have, and some of them are done very well, and then some of them are extremely constrained in a lot of ways. I think the going back, it's really about connecting people to each other in more meaningful ways, because they're the ones that are going to be the builders. So it's
Right,
not, nothing's going to get built top down. You're going
right,
to enable the system. People are going to be the builders, and
right,
helping people to understand that you have to have logic, and you have to have a little bit of artist, you
right,
have a little bit of design with you, but with a little bit of creativity, you can really do anything that
right.
that that it is that you want to do, or you can really work with the team to do anything. And so I think it's a matter of storytelling. Like,
Hmm.
think about role models in our lives. Like, I've had great mentors in my life, great entrepreneurs, great storytellers, great performers, and so I learned from them. And so
Right,
how do you nurture, create, and celebrate those not gatekeepers but accelerators that lift the people around them? And it's really about being intentional about the human element.
very true, very true. As you were speaking, I was thinking about the next question here, which I find very fascinating. If the workforce is becoming AI and human, connecting it back to our topic of discussion, What kind of leadership system or operating model do companies actually need to run this efficiently? Having both people and technology working side by side.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you think about the initiatives that many organizations have in terms of understanding skills and
Right,
mapping skills, uh, if you map all the skills in your organization, that's great. Understanding which of those skills can be supported by AI or
right.
can be done by AI, and understanding what that evolution looks like is interesting. I've seen a number of companies, including Atheon and others, that are doing skill mapping and then helping companies with essentially a flashlight out in the future. Like, here's where we're at now. Here's where we can go. What things are human? What things are AI? And what things are human? Plus AI in some ways. I think that's an important evolution. I'll say from the leadership perspective, this is why I built what I built at Baryons, because we need the human performance layer to be
Mm,
able to think through. I mean, humans power our business. They're the most important thing. And for a leader that says, I want transparency, I want a culture of openness, accountability, never ending improvement, that's great. But it's really hard to do that. And it's really hard to sense that signal, as you're moving through that. And so with what we built for Baryons for leaders, it's really about, how do I understand where my team's winning, challenges, emerging risks that are there, changes in signal, maybe innovation propensity, but seeing those signals before they essentially hit the P&L.
very true, very true. You touch on something as you're talking that came to mind, skills gap and skills analysis. Is that something that would be important if humans are working with AI? Because maybe the skills that the human may not be able to be proficient in, the AI can replace that. Would you see companies and human resources still tackling this topic of closing the skills gap?
I see the skills gap closing because there's going to be a whole bunch of new skills.
Mm,
So let's think about it this way. When electricity was first discovered, what's the number one thing we did? Let's light the night
but
bulb,
yeah,
right? I don't have a hair dryer for obvious reasons. Many people do, but the electric motor was around right when electricity was discovered.
very
But
true.
hair dryers didn't come out for a long time. Leaf blowers and all these different things. Think about those as sort of species in an animal kingdom of technology in some ways. And so we're just at the beginning. The skills that are going to be required to take 10 AI agents and be a single person, what used to be a department of 20 people, now I'm a single person in that. And now I need to have all the skills that everyone had, or at least maybe some of the knowledge that they had. But what I really need is the wisdom. And this is where skills and experiences drive understanding, and understanding plus stories is where wisdom comes from. So the skills for the end user, and also the skills for the people that are guiding the organization in terms of people development, they're going to continue to evolve. There'll be the emergence of the hairdryer skill.
Wow. It sounds very exciting and fascinating to see that. For some of us who will be able to witness more of this development happening. What does the future of talent and learning look like in the world where AI is embarked in everyday work? Not a single task will be excluded from AI.
Uh, can you repeat that question one more time?
Absolutely. What
Sorry.
does the future of talent and learning look like in a world where AI is embarked in everyday work?
Well, managing talent is going to include human intelligence and
Right.
artificial intelligence and the boundaries associated with that. So when we think about IT managing systems and we think about HR managing people, there's a revectoring of really what that function is in some ways, because if we're managing humans and human resources or human capital, we are managing them with their resources
Right.
that they're using in some ways. And I think that requires a bit of a skill and a paradigm shift in a lot of ways. How do you get the visibility across things, right? If I have the department that was 20 people and now I'm the department of one,
Right.
um, how are we interfacing? How do you know what's going right for my team or what's going wrong for my team?
That is true.
Am I do I need to tell you that, or is that just a problem I self-organize and I solve myself? And so when we talk about like emerging skills, the ability to connect across virtual and real employees is going to be a really important thing to understand for leaders in the future.
Very true, very true. And then I guess going along with what you're saying about leaders, especially for those right now who those leaders who feel extremely overwhelmed by AI and the implementation of the technology in their company, in their departments, etc., and etc. What is the first move they should be making?
Well, I'll tell you the first move some are making. If you look at the news in the recent weeks, there are CEOs of major companies that said, I'm not the person. I'm out, and they've resigned literally. And so I think there's three really, really important things. One is your mindset. What got us here won't get us there. Einstein said we can't use the same consciousness to solve a problem that created. There's a whole bunch of quotes that basically say, like, forget your backpack, get really curious, start to look at the world differently. When we develop new mindsets about what the technology is, can be, and should have an effect for us, then we can start to develop new skill sets, right? So if I say, I don't want to use AI and you got me to use it, and then now you and I are working together, now we have an agent that's working with us and helping us as a thought partner. And now I have a new skill set. Because of that new skill set, when I look at something, say, well, Rejoice and I worked on it that way. Now I have a new thinking frame. And that's how we find ways to think differently, get tooling and get skills that help us do that, and then find new ways to apply those, because we're only limited by our creativity and innovation in how we do what I call the AI human sandwich.
Wow, excellent. As you're speaking, what came to mind is the concept of growth mindset and those who are not in that bracket. So, as you said, some leaders will have to resign. I anticipate that those who have automatically a growth mindset will gravitate towards learning technology and AI. And those who are not are probably going to step back behind and so forth. So it's interesting that those concepts are also coming to the surface as we're having these conversations.
Well, old ideas need new structures, and new ideas need old structures. And that's the moment in time that we're in. There are a bunch of management principles that are going to be deprecated, but there are other management principles that may not be applicable now that are going to become applicable.
Very true. Very true. Let's discuss into the future what things will potentially look like. When you think about the next 5 to 10 years from now, what does that mean to accelerate human potential? What does that mean to you?
So we're really talking about AI so much right now, but the thing that we're not really talking about is quantum computing. So AI, as we're evolving it and it's exponentially growing, has the ability to exponentially accelerate quantum computing. When we hit quantum computing, there are a massive amount of unlocks that happen. There are a bunch of things that break. Q-Day, as they call it, is when encryption is broken, right? But suddenly drug discovery increases, our ability to create new materials increases. There's a startup that's going to be maybe a handful of people or maybe even one person that will build photosynthetic paint that will just get rid of batteries. The other thing that we are only talking about a limited amount is robotics.
Wow.
We see them, right? So we have this convergence of artificial intelligence and the workforce, the white collar workforce. We have quantum computing that disrupts a lot of industries, but unlocks a ton of new industries. And then we have robotics as well. And so that disrupts the blue collar workforce. So all ends of the spectrum of the workforce are disrupted. And what we know as companies are disrupted. I'm not saying that to be negative. I'm saying there's a massive amount of opportunity for people that have a team that they like and have a dream or a passion that they get really curious about, because you can use AI to unlock it. Your access to quantum computing will be unbelievable. And the use of robotic technologies to build anything at macro scale or even micro scale is unlocked. And so for those with a little bit of an entrepreneurial gene, it's your time.
This is the time. Thank you so much, Michael, for spending some time with us and also explaining to us the future of work, or what you already anticipate that we're in, a human plus AI workflow. So do you have any last minute words? And for those who are listening today or watching, if they want to be in touch with you to learn more about your company or what you're doing outside of your company, what is the best method for them to reach out to you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Mike Harushka, or email me, mike@baryons.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those listening, thank you for tuning in. Until next week, have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.